Hello, everyone. This is Anna Pacheco. My guest today is Sarah Wimmett. She primarily sells real estate in Rio Arriba and around Santa Fe. Sarah, do I have your permission to excuse me, to record this interview?
Yes, you do.
Oh, good. So, what really struck me, what really interested me when I contacted you earlier this week was the fact that you have worked as a contractor in addition to being a realtor. So, if you could tell us a little bit about what it's like to remodel homes in New Mexico, sell real estate in New Mexico. I know that there's a very low inventory right now of real estate. So, if you can give us a kind of a rundown in your experience as a realtor, that would be great.
Okay, I'm not a contractor, but my partner is a contractor, and we have done several remodels and several spec houses. The spec houses were in the Abiquiu area. We just completed and sold a remodel up in Alcalde last year. It was a little adobe house that most people would have demolished, but we totally redid it, and it came out really, really cute.
And
Oftentimes,
why do you say that somebody else would have just had it demolished? Was it really in that bad a disrepair or what?
well, it looked pretty sad and dark, and somebody I think probably would have dismantled it because it needed so much work.
Sarah, would you do me a favor? Can you speak up a little? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Yep, absolutely. Yes,
Okay. So then your partner has experience actually remodeling Adobe Homes, which is a whole art form in itself. Is that correct?
yes, yeah. He builds adobe houses from the ground up, and then, as I said, also remodels homes.
Okay. And so in your experience, do you have you found that more difficult or is it easier to work with or what just give me give us some kind of the background of what it's like to build an Adobe house from the ground up or just to do renovations or remodels on Adobe.
I think it's probably easier to build from the ground up because you're not redoing someone else's mistakes, and you have uh, uh, your floor plan is wide open when you build from the ground up. When you have the when you're doing a remodel, you have to work within the parameters of what's there and make everything fit. And a lot of times you don't know what's wrong with the house till you get in the walls and under the floors. So oftentimes it can be more expensive to do a remodel than to actually build from scratch.
Now, I know down in Cruces, there are companies that actually make Adobe bricks. Here in northern New Mexico, are there companies where you can actually order, I need 3,000, two
Yeah,
by two Adobes? Those
yeah.
companies do exist up in, where would you be able to find them? Are they in Taos or?
No, it's in the Alcalde area. Mel Medina has the Adobe factory, and he makes mud pies all day long.
And
That's
that's
where we buy our Adobes.
right. Okay. And then in terms of your experience as a realtor, tell me a little bit about, I know again in Santa Fe, we're having there's a very low inventory. What is your experience selling real estate up in northern New Mexico these days?
Inventory is also very low. The market is very, very good. I've sold almost all of the listings that I have in November and December. They were two of the best months I've ever had in the 30 years I've been selling real estate.
And why do you think what is the reasoning behind that? Because if it was if you're saying so this November and December you've
Yes,
just sold everything. So do you think it has a lot to do with the fact that we're all in this COVID-19 pandemic? Would that have something to do with it?
yes. Interest rates are really, really good right now. That has a lot to do with it. But I think people are in a bit of a panic to get out of either fire ravaged areas or congested cities and kind of get out in the country.
Right.
Have
And
a little
so,
bit.
in your experience as a realtor, a lot of people now are fortunate enough that they can work remotely, like in Alcalde and Ojo Caliente, some of these areas that you sell Abiquiu. Is the internet good enough up there that you can work remote? Is it seamless remote transmission up there, or do you have problems? Or have you heard of that up
Well,
there?
it's not seamless by any means. What I try to do is do virtual tours on my most of my listings so that people can actually see the property from their computer at home. Lately, the governor has asked us not to go into houses with people. So I haven't really been showing any houses. I did show a piece of land recently. We were both masked and we were both definitely 10 or 20 feet away from each other. And again, that was just walking a piece of land.
Okay, but then, but what I'm asking too is, if somebody moves out to one of these areas, you sell a house, say up in Abiquiu, and they're going to work remotely from, one of the big coastal cities, is is Wi-Fi strong enough or good enough that they can have seamless, they have remote up there. They can work remotely without having to be without Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Well, a lot of areas are, some of the areas like up by Abiquiu Lake and that are very remote, they might need additional satellite dishes and, different types of internet. But like in the Ojo Caliente area, all the way up 285, they've upgraded the internet system.
Okay.
And in El Rito as well.
In El Rito. So in terms of, is there Abiquiu, of course, when I think of Abiquiu, I automatically think of Georgia O'Keeffe or the Ghost Ranch. Is that like a big draw for people? Do they want to live in that? I mean, it's an incredibly beautiful area, of course, right. But does that kind of, do people kind of, are they kind of like me? They think of Abiquiu and they automatically think Georgia O'Keeffe. Do you get that type of response from people?
Sometimes I think people are more attracted to the colors of the rocks and the art community and the vast expanses out there. I remember I sold a property for a gentleman up there, and he said, "You know what? We were here long before Georgia O'Keeffe ever came."
Right.
So,
well, for our listeners who may be watching, Georgia O'Keeffe first came to Santa Fe in 1929. In 1940, she actually bought that land up there was a private family that owned the land up there. And in 1940, her husband, Alfred Stieglitz, he died in 1946. And that's when she moved here permanently to her home up in Abiquiu near Ghost Ranch. And then she dies in 1986, and her ashes are spread up at Perdinal Mountain, which is behind her home. That's just a little bit of historical background on Georgia O'Keeffe and Abiquiu. Let me ask you: there was a mosque built up in the Abiquiu area? Is that still in existence?
Yeah, it is. It is still up there.
And is it still open? I mean, is it still being used?
Not as regularly. I haven't been there for some time, and now with COVID, I doubt people can go up there.
Because I know for a fact that was designed by a really famous architect, I think from Egypt or something. Yeah. So it's kind of got everything in New Mexico, particularly northern Mexico, it's very special. So your experience, how long have you been selling real estate?
For 30 years.
For 30 years, and has it always been in New Mexico?
Yes.
And I think I read from your bio, aren't you from Espanola?
Yes, I was born in Espanola.
We probably know some of the same people. So right. Tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up in Espanola when you were a kid and what it's like today.
Well, I grew up in El Rancho, and my dad was a physicist up in Los Alamos. That's what brought us here from Boston.
Uh-huh.
And I went to Pewaukee High School and Pewaukee Elementary, and then I went to high school at the Albuquerque Academy. But growing up and going to school in Pewaukee I was definitely the minority, and my brother and I got beat up many times because we were the only white kids there. So it was a little tough.
And you're right there. My son, he played football for St. Michael's here in Santa Fe. I'd go to his football games, and the field. I mean, I'm not interested in football anyway, but the view from that football field is incredible. I used to just enjoy sitting there and looking at the mountains. It was spectacular. But so you were probably few of the Anglo kids growing up then, but it's changed a lot now, don't you think?
Yeah, it has. It was kind of tough though, to be young and not know why people didn't like you.
Yeah, I guess that would have been a rougher area, because I know I grew up here in Santa Fe, and it's still a beautiful small town, but it's, hardly anybody is from Santa Fe. I always tell people now that Santa Fe has become like a mini LA. Everybody is from somewhere else. Whereas when I grew up here, you know, you couldn't walk 2 feet without running into your next door neighbor or something. And
Right.
that's getting harder now. It's really, you rarely see local people anymore unless you go to a funeral or maybe church or something. That's where you might
Right.
still run into people. Is that the case you find
No,
in the Espanola
very
area?
much so. When I used to have my restaurant in Santa Fe, I would have the same people, my regular customers would come into the restaurant 7 days a week.
Wow.
And
What restaurant did you have?
it was called OJ Sarah's.
Oh,
It was
geez.
behind the Hilton on Guadalupe Street. It's
Okay.
called Dinner for Two now.
Okay, I know Dinner for Two. Okay, wow,
Yeah.
well, that's going back a while then. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I sold it in 91.
In 90, well, I actually came back to Santa Fe in 1992 for 16
Oh,
years. I lived in Midtown Manhattan in New York City. So I
oh,
was gone. So when you were selling your place, that's when I actually came back.
I
Um, so as soon as you sold your place, did you automatically become a realtor, or what made you
yeah.
decide to be a realtor? Why did you do that?
Well, I had some money from the restaurant, so I bought a couple of pieces of land up north and an old adobe, and um, a friend of mine encouraged me to get my license, so I did that. I moved up to El Rito after I sold my restaurant, and then I did get my real estate license.
And so you've been selling real estate now for 30 years. Tell me, you know, of course, price is going to be something you're going to talk about, but what is I mean, how have things changed in terms of selling real estate 3 decades ago to present day?
Interest rates. I mean, I remember when interest rates were, 10 and 12% at one time. Now they're a little over three. So, interest rates have a lot to do. Also, all the northern New Mexico is more discovered now than it had been. Those nice little communities like Ojosarco and El Rito. People know about those places now and they want to buy up there. So the prices have changed considerably.
What would be the median cost of something in one of those little areas now?
Well, it's so hard to tell because
Of, I mean, like
some
say a modest home, not, you know, not
so
a brand new, 5,000 square foot
yeah.
Adobe or something, but like a
Well,
normal home.
yeah, maybe a modest home would be like 150,000, something
Well,
like
that's
that.
still a bargain. I mean, that's
Yeah,
still considering. Yeah, that's
I
not
think so
bad
too.
in this day and age.
Right.
Yeah. Um, I remember when I bought my home in Santa Fe, I don't know if it's still the same thing, but I had to have like 10% of the down payment. Is that still a requirement for buying homes these days?
Well, nowadays you can have 3%, and there's also some first-time home buyer incentives that many people can use.
And so you don't, so a large down payment is not necessarily required.
Exactly. If
Okay.
it's a second
So you were saying if it was a
home,
second
you can
home,
get away with 10% down, but again, yeah, if it's a second home, you can do 10% down.
and
Yeah.
how was a second home different than the first home in terms of a down payment?
Well, just if it's your very first home that you've ever bought, um, like there's MFA loans and HomeWise has programs for first-time home buyers so that you can just get introduced to the home buying process and they give you several incentives to get you
Okay.
into a home.
But a second home is kind of considered like a luxury at that point, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And are you seeing people that are moving in, say from California, or as they call them, climate refugees? Are they usually younger with children, or are they older, or what? Are you seeing a demographic? Is there a more prevalent demographic that you're seeing coming into New Mexico now?
Not really. I mean, recently I sold a home to a family actually that did move here with children and he got a job in Los Alamos. So that's why they moved. Older people moving in because they're retiring. Yeah, there's not really any specific type. I mean, they're young, old, with and without children, self-employed, working at the lab, quite a variety.
Right. And then with you and your partner, are there any like new housing developments going up in northern New Mexico that our listeners might be interested in or should be aware of? Are there any developments coming up?
Not really, but there's certain parcels of land in and around Abiquiu and Ojo where you could build a home. I don't know of any specific subdivisions that are new.
And do you just actually sell lots of land in your business?
Yeah, I sell homes and land. I even have I have a bed and breakfast up in Ojo Caliente that my family owns. That's it's under contract, but I'm selling that. And then there's a store on the way to Ojo called Oliver's that I just listed. So I sell land, homes, and sometimes commercial buildings.
And so your family's actually selling the bed and breakfast next to Ojo
Yeah.
Caliente. And why is that? Why are they deciding to? Why is your family deciding to get out of that business?
Well, my sister had a clothing store. My other sister ran the bed and breakfast, and they both really wanted to retire. They're close to 70, so they just want to have a little different lifestyle now that they're a little bit older.
Well, that sounds perfect for, say, a younger couple maybe coming in from California that wants to have a business and wants to live in a beautiful area. That would be ideal.
Exactly. Yeah, because they could have a store. They can live in the apartment. There's 6 rooms at the bed and breakfast. It's a great little spot, and you can walk to the hot springs from there.
And then in addition to the hot springs, when I grew up here, probably you probably know the same thing. It was this funky, cool place. My parents would go soak in the hot springs, and us kids, we would be in the swimming pool. Do you remember when it was? I mean, now it's kind of like it's been pretty it's pretty upscale now. It's been gentrified for sure.
Right.
But do you remember when it was like funky Ojo?
Yes, and you were afraid you'd get athlete's foot if you went in there.
Well, it was just, but it was a neat feel. I get very nostalgic for that when I go up there. And there used to be, I don't know, I think it's still in use at least part of the time, very historic old church in Ojo Caliente, Catholic church. Do you know that?
Yeah, that's right across from my family's bed and breakfast.
And what's the name of the church?
Oh boy, I'm not 100% sure.
But I remember, I mean, do they still have church services? They maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember that it's such an old church that the wooden floors would creak when you would walk in, so you couldn't go late to church. I mean, you could, but everybody would turn at you and say, "Oh, she's late," and it was the floor that gave you away because it made all these creaky sounds. And then Ojo Caliente, for people that may be watching this, it's a historic old hot springs that people go to. Is there enough? I mean, of course, we're in we're all in a pandemic lockdown, but if people were thinking of maybe buying your family's bed and breakfast, is it sustainable in terms of tourism on year round, or just the summer months?
It is sustainable year round. The only problem now is COVID is an issue, and also the hot springs is closed right now until June.
There was a fire, if I'm not mistaken.
There was a fire, yeah, but they're redoing everything, getting it up to speed. So
okay,
that's a big draw.
And then up at Ojo Caliente, that's like right. I don't know if that's in the Carson National Forest or it's next to the Carson National Forest. Can you tell me anything about that area? I mean, do people live in Carson? Are there little housing developments at all, or is it just like government public land?
Well, there is Carson National Forest, and there's also BLM land that surrounds Ojo Caliente. And there are a few what they call in-holdings in the forest areas where it's private property, and you have to get an easement through the forest to get there. But only a few little in-holdings are.
Is that feasible? Are you able to get that from the government?
Not usually. I mean, some of those in-holdings had been there for many, many years, and that's why they still exist. But in general, the BLM land and the Forest Service land is owned by all of us, and that's hopefully it'll stay that way.
Right.
So we have beautiful land to hike and bike on.
And so, and then from Ojo Caliente to the city of Taos is what, maybe 30 minutes?
Yes.
Okay,
you can go up north of Ojo and then through Carson and up.
So you're from Ojo Caliente, you're about 30 minutes to Taos, and probably about 45 to Santa Fe, more or less.
About an hour to Santa Fe.
Oh, is it about an hour? Okay, good. And then getting back to land up in Abiquiu or wherever, like, what is the going rate for like lots there? Do they usually go like in 2 acres or 5 acres, or how are lots generally sold up there?
In general, the whole Abiquiu area is primarily, it was subdivided in the 60s, and the subdivision was called the Santa California subdivision. A couple of gentlemen divided all the property up in half-acre lots and sold many lots over the phone. People didn't even know what they were buying.
Wow.
But since then, many developers have consolidated the half-acre lots, and there's 10-acre minimums.
And what would 10 acres cost? Like a median cost, maybe?
maybe, you know, between 100 and 150,000. It just depends on where it's located. And, you know, right within the Abiquiu area, some of the lots are irrigated, and that definitely means more money per lot. And if it's river frontage or irrigated, that's more than dry land.
Yeah, because I mean, because if you say if you buy something for like 150,000, then you're still going to have to dig a well, which is going to be at least 35 to 40,000, correct? Probably
Yeah,
more or less. And then the house itself. So you're looking at, you know, probably a $700,000 expenditure or something. Wouldn't you
yeah,
say? You know?
yeah, from 5 to 7 to develop it and build a nice home.
And then, and in terms of, are there plenty? I know that your partner is a builder up there, but is it hard to find a builder, or is it, you know, is it easy to get some? Once you got the lot, you get the purchase the lots up there. Are there enough contractors in the area where you could, you know, conceivably be in a house, say 18 months later or something?
Possibly, yeah. A lot of the contractors will be coming out of Santa Fe. There aren't as many contractors locally as there had been. And there also aren't as many well drillers. It's really hard to find a well driller anymore. A lot of the old drillers have retired.
That's what I've heard from another realtor that you might get on a waiting list for about 2 years out, that type of
Yeah.
thing, right? So you know, our my timer just went off, so we're out of time for this interview. But is there anything that you'd like to convey to people that may be watching this interview in terms of thinking of moving to New Mexico and buying real estate here? Is there some sage advice that you'd like to leave us all with?
Well, when I am in a vehicle with people that are coming from a different state, I have a little chat with them in regards to don't try to come here and change the traditions and the ways of life. You know, I've had people say, "Oh, I wouldn't want anybody to have a mobile home near me or have any junk vehicles or have a fire in their fireplace." You know, I always say, "Hey, if you want to move here, move in and enjoy the culture and the people, but don't try to change what they've done for hundreds of years.
Well,
You'll
and
get along a lot better."
I think that's kind of a like people it's a normal response in the sense that people want to be they want what's familiar to them. So if they come out here, it's definitely not familiar to them if they've coming from a, you know, say Los Angeles or something. This is going to be very different for them. And so I agree with you. They, you know, you when you move out here, it's really best if you can adapt to our way of life, and that's you'll enjoy it much more, I think, right?
Yeah, and people will be more receptive to you.
Right. For the most part, people are pretty giving and welcoming, I believe. But you're right. People do get a little upset when people come here and they want to make it just like it was. Well, back home, blah 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 blah. But they're no
Yeah,
longer back home. Yeah. Well, you
yeah,
know, I want to thank you. You know, that bed and breakfast up in Ojo Caliente, that sounds great. I think I should go up there. But
I
I
think
want to
you should.
thank you, and we'll stay in touch. How's that? Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.